there might not be another player whose stock has risen more pre-draft than Zay Flowers is. So he has flown up draft boards, and now all of a sudden there is a chance that he could actually be the first wide receiver taken off the board. Flowers can really land almost anywhere, but it sounds like a lot of teams love him. He was very good at Boston College, where he was able to showcase his speed and his skill despite being a bit of a smaller guy. And Zay Flowers, just in general, he could be really good in the NFL, but to really get the full grasp, let's take it back to the beginning. Zay Flowers was a 3-star recruit coming out of university school in Davie, Florida. He helped U School reach the Florida 4A state semifinals as a junior and senior. Flowers decided to commit to Boston College, which was actually the only Power 5 school that gave him a scholarship. He played in every single game as a true freshman, starting twice. He got off to a bang with 116 all-purpose yards in his first game versus Virginia Tech. He finished that first season with 536 yards from scrimmage and 4 touchdowns. Then, as a sophomore, Flowers made the All-ACC first team after he had 892 receiving yards, the second most in the conference. Flowers went on to record nearly 1,000 yards from scrimmage and 10 touchdowns, including a 3-touchdown game against Pitt that tied a school record. Flowers' production did dip his junior year. He finished the season with 815 scrimmage yards and 5 touchdowns. In that offseason, Flowers was reportedly offered some pretty big money to transfer, but he decided to stay put at BC. After all, it was the only Power 5 school that believed in him, and it really did end up paying off because the next year, he had over 1,000 yards receiving with a school record 12 touchdowns. Flowers finished his college career as the school's all-time leader in career receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Now, Zay Flowers is a slot receiver with a lot of confidence. He ran a 4.42 40-yard dash at the combine, and when you watch Zay Flowers, you could just tell he's a very slippery runner who you don't really want to get into the open field. He has really good footwork that really helps him get out of the press and get out ahead of coverage. He's really fast, and his routes are able to maintain that same speed and momentum even when he's turning, and he has some really good tight moves off of breaking points. He's also good at stair-stepping man coverage and is able to avoid the defender having that leverage. Flowers doesn't necessarily have crazy hands. They're probably pretty average, but he has pretty good ball skills, and he's good at tracking and catching deep balls. He also knows when to work back to the throw if he needs to. Zay Flowers certainly has his problems, and a lot of them really do have to just do with size. You know, he's shorter. He has shorter arms and smaller hands. He may struggle to win contested catches in the pros. Flowers needs a little bit more attention to detail when it comes to his route running, and sometimes he's just kind of in too much of a hurry, and it can screw up some timing. He also needs to do a better job of finding holes in zone coverage, and really does have to worry about his drops. He did end up with some pretty bad drops at Boston College. It's not a gigantic issue, but certainly something he's going to have to fix up. Ultimately, Flowers definitely has the skill to be a good playmaker in the pros. Lance Zierlein actually comped him to Travis Benjamin, who was a 9-year NFL vet after he was drafted in 2012 by the Browns in the 4th round. Zay Flowers visited with a lot of teams like you always expect, but there was one that was a bit unconventional. The Chiefs actually requested for him to work out with Patrick Mahomes in Texas. That could be some like smokescreen by the Chiefs or something, but that certainly isn't a normal visit. Kansas City, they did lose Juju Smith-Schuster and Mecole Hardman to free agency, so a wide receiver need is there, and for a while, it really did seem like the late first round was going to be the spot for Flowers, and of course the Chiefs could move up if they wanted to. He's had some other visits that do make a lot of sense. The Titans hosted him, which makes all the sense in the world because Tennessee has a complete disaster of a wide receiver situation.
Baby, come back.
The Titans have the 11th pick in the draft, so that'd be pretty high, but, we'll see. He visited the Ravens, who could also use some wideout help. Yes, they did sign Odell, but just Rashad Bateman really is behind him, and that depth chart is still very weak. Flowers visited the Patriots, who seem to always have a big need at wide receiver in recent years. New England always loves those smaller slot guys anyway. Flowers visited Buffalo, who could use some help. Gabe Davis wasn't nearly as good as expected last season, and they really just need another guy because right now it's just Stephon Diggs for that offense. Finally, Zay Flowers did visit with the Cowboys. This is a little weird one to me. Yes, that visit was after they did trade for Brandon Cooks too. Flowers could definitely bring a lot to that Dallas offense, but they already have CeeDee Lamb as the one, and they have Brandon Cooks now, so I really wonder if wideout is actually the best use of that pick. Zay Flowers has been a bit of a late riser, but it does sound like he is a consensus first-round pick. Mel Kiper recently mocked him to the Steelers at 17. Now, there's an expected run of wide receivers later in the first round, and Kiper thinks that he could be the guy for Pittsburgh. I kind of disagree. I think if Jordan Addison is on the board, who played at Pitt with Kenny Pickett, the Steelers will go that way. But regardless, the Pittsburgh wideouts were horrible last season, and Flowers could be a good fit with Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. There are a handful of teams searching for a wide receiver, and it's really up to preference of the team. Todd McShay, Daniel Jeremiah, and Lance Zierlein, all three of the biggest mock drafters, all have Flowers going between picks 20 and 22. McShay has him going at 20 to the Seahawks. I don't really see it, but McShay thinks that he'd help stretch the field for Seattle, playing alongside DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Jeremiah has him at 21 to the Chargers. They usually love like those big wideouts, but Flowers could be a really explosive guy there that could definitely help out Justin Herbert. Finally, Zierlein has him at 22 to Baltimore. The Ravens signed Odell Beckham Jr., but look, there's still so much improvement needed for that wide receiver core. Zay Flowers has long been one of my favorite guys in this class. I watch a lot of ACC football, and I had a lot of chances to watch Flowers, and he always seemed to have a really big impact against Virginia Tech too. He was a really bright spot on a really bad Boston College team. I actually graduated from Virginia Tech in the fall, and last season they actually only won one conference game, and it was over BC. And they beat them pretty good. Like, they looked terrible, but Flowers didn't. He was always the guy to keep an eye on. And I really wonder what Phil Yurkovich looks like without him at Pitt next year, the old BC quarterback that's now transferred. It just felt at times that BC offense ran completely through Zay Flowers. He was always capable of that home run play where he somehow broke away or got lost behind a few defenders. He does have his downfalls, and that's why he isn't a top 10 guy. There's always the worry of smaller wide receivers. Devontae Smith is the big one that comes to mind, but when you actually watch Devontae play, he doesn't play like he's smaller. And I think that's the same case with not just Zay Flowers, but actually Josh Downs in this class too. Flowers has been an underdog for a while, and he's continued to move through that, and now he's going to be picked in the first round of the NFL draft. He didn't have good talent around him at BC. He was always the focal point of opposing defenses, and that still didn't stop him. I think he's going to be a good pro. I don't expect him to be a full-fledged superstar, but I think he'll be good. I've thought he could be a very cool fit in New England. Patriots, like I said, they're in dire need of wide receiver, and he'd be a great spot in their slot. That being said, I think he goes around that 20-ish mark, and I think the Ravens are gonna be the best spot. They already have their good outside guy like Odell. You can have Odell, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers there. We'll see if Rashad Bateman comes back healthy, but if you could have Zay Flowers catching passes from Lamar Jackson like those other guys, and I think the Ravens are definitely gonna want to use a pick on an offensive weapon just to sweeten that pot a little bit more and get Lamar to re-sign. And I think you're feeling pretty good about that offense if you take Zay. But at the end of the day, who knows what's going to happen and where he's going to go. All it takes is one team to love Zay Flowers for him to go high. And it sounds like a lot of teams like this dude. And that's why he's been one of the highest risers ahead of the draft.